Good morning, second graders. It's Mrs. Sylvester. Happy Tuesday. I hope you're doing well. Here is our morning message. It is Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. Dear Cook Cardinals, look who is here with me. It's Flat Mrs. Schweitzer. Maybe some of you have seen pictures of her on Facebook, or there may be some lucky second graders who have even had Flat Mrs. Schweitzer visit their house. Has anyone had Flat Mrs. Schweitzer at your house? I thought we would enjoy Flat Mrs. Schweitzer in a special morning meeting activity where we review some popular book genres. Genre is a fancy word to describe the type of text. The two main genres of text we read are fiction and nonfiction. Let's dive deeper. From your teachers who love to read, P.S. All of the second grade teachers and Mrs. Schweitzer and Flat Mrs. Schweitzer hope you are reading every day. So, Cook Cardinals, I have a special review for us of some main types of genres, and Flat Mrs. Schweitzer will help review them. So, the first one, as I said, is a big genre called fiction, and fiction can be realistic. So these stories can be true to life, but are mostly from the author's imagination. The characters and setting could exist in real life, and the problem is believable. So here are some examples that you might be familiar with. Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. That is the original story, and we know that we read a sequel of Alexander Who Used to Be Rich last Sunday. Everything that happened in that text could really happen. So that is realistic fiction. Junie B. Jones is a really fun book, and you might have read some of her books in that series. Everything could really happen. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and then lots of books that Judy Blume, a popular author, writes. This one's called Freckle Juice. That also is realistic fiction. And Patricia Polacco, most of her books, if you're familiar with her, are realistic fiction, and Ramona. Okay, now another genre within fiction would be the opposite of realistic, and that is fantasy. So it's still made up in the author's imagination, but the characters could not really exist in real life, or whatever the characters are doing, something about the story could not really happen. So a lot of text that is fantasy have talking animals and magic. Sometimes a lot of fantasy stories, parts of it could seem like it really could happen, but then if there's one little detail that's imaginary, it is in the group of fantasy. All right. Dr. Seuss has a lot of fun books that fall in this category too. Let's see our next genre. Ooh, mystery books. So I'd say that this is a subcategory within fiction. Some mystery books could be realistic. I'm looking. Oh, I know Cam Jansen. If you've ever read those books, those are realistic fiction that are in the group of mystery. Also, the Boxcar Children, if you've heard of that series. But then some other mystery books would be fantasy, but they are a fictional story, and there's something about the plot. The characters are discovering secrets or solving a puzzling crime or any type of unknown. And how about this special genre within fiction? But we have this adjective, historical fiction. So if you look at that word historical, you might see the base word is history. So these stories are fiction, but they take place in a real specific time in history that something really happened. These texts might be based on historical events and actual people, but it is from the author's imagination. So I know that when we read The House on Maple Street, those events really did happen, but then the family, who was a part of the story, that the author just made up, where they found the old arrowhead, if you recall that text, but something about what happened in history is true. So kind of a mixture between fiction, but including some nonfiction details about the historical events. All right, here is another genre called folk tales. Now, these stories are special fictional stories because they have been passed down from one group to another throughout many years in history. And there can be different kinds of folk tales. So usually a folk tale that has a strong lesson or moral and often uses animals as characters, we then classify that as a fable. I love this text. It's called The Talking Eggs and the Little Red Hen. And then there's a whole bunch of fables called Aesop's Fables, like the tortoise and the hare. Then a fairy tale can be classified as a folk tale, but we change to describe it as a fairy tale if the characters are really using magic to solve a problem and often have a happy ending. So sometimes I have not really understood, what makes a fairy tale versus a folk tale, but this definition is saying if there's a lot of magic involved, and oftentimes when there's a princess too, we call that a fairy tale. Okay, and finally we have poetry, and in texts that would be classified as poetry, we know that the author uses words that are very important. Most of the time, poems have special sounds that maybe include words that rhyme. There's a rhythm. The author uses a really strong word choice and inspiring thoughts and feelings. A lot of picture books I know rhyme, and so they could be thought of as a poem. But there's some books that have a collection of poems too. And I know that if you watched our video last week, there were 2 poems connecting to Seek the Sun. I think one was called I Am Boom. So poems can be really fun. They also can be fiction or nonfiction, but most of the time they're fun and fictional. Oh, and we have a couple more. Informational text. We read a lot of this genre in our classroom that gives us real information. You can also call it nonfiction, informing the reader about a specific topic. And then a biography would be a special type of nonfiction where we're learning about a person's life. And we know that we read all about Theodore Roosevelt, and that was a biography about a famous president. We have a little note down here that an autobiography is when a person writes their own life story. So not another person being the author, but that person, him or herself, writes that story. Okay, and those are some main types of literary genres. And I know that Flat Mrs. Schweitzer loves when you check out a variety of books from the library. We know that you can't go to the library right now, but hopefully you're enjoying lots of books online or even rereading books that you have at home. And Mrs. Schweitzer, Flat Mrs. Schweitzer, and all of your second grade teachers are very proud of you. So keep up your good reading and have a great Tuesday.